What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Aubrey Marcus podcast. This is a banner day, a momentous day, because what none of you know is that there's a missing podcast. Well, some of you might know it because the very first podcast starts with number 2. Why? Why is that, you might ask? Because for the very first podcast, I asked my good longtime friend, Seekay Chin, who's here with me right now, I asked him to come over and record the very first podcast. Well, we put the microphones backwards on that podcast, so it sounded like garbled gobbledygook.
Yeah, they were catching a hidden recording of us talking in the other room.
Right.
Like it was like some sort of secret.
Like a phone tap through the wall.
That's right. It was awesome.
Some fucking secret shit. So we didn't ever post that. So that's lost to the world. But now, finally,
it's out there somewhere. Somebody on the internet has it.
But now, finally, we get to go and
have a real one
and do this for real. So welcome, my friend. It's a pleasure to have you. One of the most hardworking dudes. You owner of a current restaurant, Swift's Attic, about to open another one. Wu Chow. I'm fucking stoked about that.
Man,
too.
We are too.
Everywhere you're at is like my favorite place to eat of all time, and we always have great conversations and good laughs. So
yeah, for sure.
Glad to have you here, brother.
Man, I'm glad to be here.
And another thing too, Aubrey Marcus podcast just crossed 1 million downloads. That's
what?
Cool. First podcast since we crossed 1 million downloads. This is like a lot of shit going on.
It is.
The timing is right.
It's a banner day.
It is a banner day.
Banner day. That is awesome. Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's go in a little bit, because one of the things that I think I started off talking about that last podcast for you is I appreciate anybody who takes whatever they do to the level of greatness. You know, they just go all in on that shit. And that's something that you've exemplified every time I've seen you, show up and do what you're doing, and it happens to be the restaurant business. But, where did that come from? And, what is your general philosophy on that allows you to get there?
I think that there's something to be said about finding what you want to be great at first. Every day I think about when I go to work and the hours that I work, and if I happen to meet up with somebody later on and they're getting off work, I don't realize how blessed I am, how lucky I am that when I speak of work, it comes with such a positive connotation. Like if I tell somebody that I was at the office till late last night, it doesn't come with a burden that says I was at the office late last night. Woe is me.
Yeah, working for some schmuck.
Exactly. Or even if it wasn't, even if it was working for someone. I mean, I listen to some of your employees that come by and say they love working it on it. And those guys, and I'm not buttering you up, by the way, I'm legit. And it's saying that somebody that can look and leave their job and say that I respect who I work for, I respect what I do. He's helping me, Juan, for instance, he's helping him develop a branding of his own underneath an umbrella that you've provided. It allows you to be passionate about it, as composed as that thought is, as you've put together, you've allowed other people to kind of blossom. Sure, and so there's a thought process that says, for me, I don't think a lot of people take the time to find what they want to be great at. I think there's a lot of the idea that has the mentality that says that you have to work at a job to make money, and then you have your passions on the side, and never the two shall meet. And I think that, I took what that cliche guidance counselor probably told me in 4th grade and figure out what you'd be willing to do for free, and then you'll never work a day in your life type of thing. And I took it to heart, and I just realized, like, what am I good at and what do I enjoy? And it all lined up with taking care of people and having great conversations and meeting great people and networking with people, and all these things had a common passion, which was I just love to eat. And so at the end, Wu Chow is a perfect example. It came from completely selfish terms, which is I've been in Austin for 12 years. I don't know where I can go get really good Chinese food. So I said, I'm open my own.
For people who are just listening, CK's Chinese as fuck.
Yeah, I'm aggressively Chinese. I'm overtly, as they call it, I'm overtly Chinese. There's no hidden Chinese about it. Other than the fact, if you told me that I'm 6'5",
yeah,
they're like,
that's
wait,
true.
wait, what? But, otherwise.
I mean, people see Yao Ming in this era, though.
Yeah,
It's not like the old days.
That's true. That's true.
But, yeah, so I really like what you're saying and how you're describing it, because you found what I would call the vocation. And the vocation is, running restaurants, but that it combined a lot of your passions, and it's in line with some of your mission, which is to create you can describe your own mission, but that's to me the 3 areas that you look at. You look at your mission, like what you want to leave the world as, what you want your impact to be. And then you look at your passions, what you enjoy doing. And then you try and find a vocation that's going to be the bridge between those. Hopefully it accesses your passions, but maybe your passion is something that definitely can't make you money. That's cool too.
Right.
But at least your vocation should serve your mission.
That's right.
At the very least. And you found that in running a restaurant. It's just kind of combined many things, which is same for me. I found it in running this company. And I also think you make a good point. It's not about whether you work for someone or be an entrepreneur. There's so many people in these kind of business self-help things that it's all about entrepreneurship. Like they put that up as the ultimate pedestal. And that's great. It has its pluses and has its minuses. But if you're plugged into a movement and a shared mission of something you believe in, that's great too. It's not that
Absolutely.
everybody needs to be CEO of their own thing.
Not everyone is suited for it. I mean, to be completely honest, there's a certain degree of insanity that comes from running your own business. I think there's a degree of what I was called that you're treading the line of arrogance and confidence and a degree of just blind faith in yourself. Because, like for me, restaurant is one of the most highly failed businesses out there. I don't know if it might be the next to, drug dealing or something that you get.
That is super successful. What do you
but
mean?
people get shut down instantaneously, like randomly.
But at least they make money first.
That's true.
Restaurants never make money and then get shut down.
Yeah, and so there's an idea that says that I look at that and stare in the face of it and says, well, yeah, but I'm not going to fail.
Yeah.
Or either that or I'm not scared to fail. I think there's a difference. I'm not scared to fail at this point. I have enough confidence in myself that I think I know what I'm doing.
Scared to fail is such an interesting thing because I think there's as equal, if not greater, a scared to succeed type of thing. And I was trying to track that, but it really all goes back to a fear of failure. But what I found when I really tracked that deeper, like why people are afraid of that, it's like people are afraid of not just failing, but failing when they really go all in.
Right.
Like when they've put 100% into it and then they fail, that's what they're really afraid of. So in a relationship, people will hold back some of their emotions like, I wasn't really all in it anyway, so if it fails, it goes down. And in business endeavors, they'll put, some of their resources in it, but they'll be hedging their bets a little bit. Like, I was just trying it out and learned a few things.
Right.
But what's terrifying for people is going all in and failing at 100%. But the irony is you can't succeed unless you go 100%.
100%. And the thing about it is, you can't succeed at the level that in your mind you would like to succeed at.
Yeah.
Or when somebody describes success. And when you're going back to your point about not everyone is meant to be a CEO, it's, I have a skill set. We all have skill sets. And the idea is to say that what skill set can we come together with to create a company and share that. I mean, I think there's a degree of, for me at least, for my company, of I had to slough off a lot of ego because there was saying that there is some talent in being able to convince good people to come work with me, but by and large, I'm a coach trying to coordinate this kind of orchestra of 1,900 moving parts, and so you have to recognize that. Even though I'm directing it, there are people who are just equally, if not more valuable to make this work. And, the
CEO is a position of service. And I think a lot of people get that all fucked up. I mean, we're here at service to the organization and to all of the employees that are a part of it, and I think they get it the other way. And it's a mutual feedback loop. But I think that a lot of people forget that. And it's not that maybe you aren't cut out to be CEO. It's just maybe that's not your best vocation. That's not the best thing that you're most suited at. Sure, you could, but do you want that? Is that going to help you the most? Is that kind of stress and pressure 24/7? Are you going to be able to be able to handle that? Because, when you're in that position, this shit's relentless. I know for many years, you had 4 days off a year, literally 4. You permitted yourself 1 day off per season, and it was like Seekay's off day, and then everybody would get excited. It's like
we throw a party.
We throw a party. You'd choose a color, a theme, and you throw a party for your 1 day off. Except by throwing a party on your 1 day off, you were actually not off at all.
Yeah, work
because you were working.
Shaking hands.
You were just talking and doing your thing, networking, and it became a networking event. So you pretty much had 0 days off for like 10 fucking years. Now finally, at least I see you out and you're like seeing some shows and stuff and getting a few days. But that was the grind phase. That was establishing yourself as one of the best restaurateurs in Austin and around, and now you've actually been on TV and shit. You got a blue check mark by your name and fancy shit.
We trying.
So all of that has paid off. And I remember you came to me and you were excited when you paid off all your investors on the restaurant. It's a success not only ostensibly but financially. I mean, you've delivered.
It's one of those things that it's still, and I think this is the entrepreneurial spirit that you speak of. And if you have this, if anybody's listening has this, then I advise you to go try it. I mean, that's an itch that once it's scratched, nothing feels better. Like right. It really is. It's the idea of like being able to create something, like the idea of, when I was doing a graphic design work back in college and seeing something that I made go into print, or having an idea. I mean, one of the first things, the most exciting part about when I was opening up Swift's, the most recent one, was where something was sketched out on paper, and I can still remember talking to my business partner Stuart about it. And then that was over dinner. And then that afternoon, I came up with the name, literally driving down the street to go, hey, what about Swift's Attic? And that happened. And then, we got our sign. And then it's kind of like every time you see it, you go, man, I remember the day that I came up with that. And it's just magical to me. It's something
that's the best shit. It's the creative process of it. The rest is it can be fun too. But for me, like if I conceive of a product or conceive of the brand, like I remember the conversations with Bodhi when I was talking about On It.
Yeah.
And the name became On It, and I was like, let's just fucking call it On It. I'll double the ends and make it a noun and we'll roll with it. These moments that happen are the real treasures, or a product where, like our hemp force protein, at first it didn't have a name, but it was a recipe. And that was one I actually got to make in my kitchen. It was cocoa and it was hemp, and I'm blending stuff. It was coming out terrible. People were tired. I was wearing people out with my samples, Caitlin at the time was like, no, please, no more protein samples. It's disgusting. You suck at this. I was like, no, I'm going to figure this out. Right. And then one time I just did it, and you take that first sip and it's like, oh, this is the
eureka
good.
Moment.
Oh, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, this is pretty good. And then I start running around feeding it to neighbors, and you have these moments, and then now you see it packaged and it's in all these smoothies and selling, around the world. Those are the cool parts of it.
That's
right. But then there's the challenging parts of it too. I mean, you're at service to a lot of different employees. You're buffering a lot of issues within the company. Anybody has problems, you're the sponge.
Shit rolls uphill in this business.
You absorb it and you clean it yourself in that relationship before it goes back into it's like you're cleaning any oil spills that are going on with your own psyche. Like some of those things people don't realize are the roles of a good CEO or any good leader.
Yeah. I mean, you said it perfectly, because this new restaurant, I'm trying to do authentic Chinese food with Western level service. That was always the caveat, was you can go to PF Chang's and get good service and a knowledgeable waiter and somebody coming by taking care of you, but it's American food.
Yeah.
Or you can go to your little mom and pop shop with a folding chair and the lady doesn't speak any English, and come by and who knows what you're going to get to eat. You're going to get half a glass of water. You're never going to get another glass of water.
There's a place like that in San Francisco.
It's delicious. But you just have to understand that, like there's no service involved to it. And so it's funny, I talked to my mother about it. Like, my Chinese has gotten incredible because my chefs don't speak any English. I mean, they literally speak no English. And I was like, I never knew how not Chinese I was until spending hours a day with some real Chinese people from China. I mean, the culture is different. There's a level of respect that's different. There's a degree of, of policy. I mean, these guys, I remember him coming up and talk to us about their work conditions, and they're asking me like, do you think it'd be possible for us to get him a desk so he doesn't have to sit on his bed to write stuff? And I'm just like, yeah, we could probably get you a desk. It's just, and it's kind of, again, every time I hear these things, I go, man, like, we're lucky to be here, and at the same time, it's up to me, in my opinion, to really push that envelope and make sure that I'm taking care of these guys. And because I've told them since day one, I'm like, I'm looking long term. Like, I want you guys to be with me. This is the team that helped me build this restaurant. I named it after my grandmother. I have a lot of weight to make this successful. So, but
your grandmother and Wu-Tang Clan, or
well, my grandmother was named from the Wu-Tang. I'm just kidding. No. Exactly. My grandmother's last name is Wu, and so the whole thing.
So that's super coincidental.
The Wu-Tang Clan. Actually, we bought her a bunch of Wu-Tang clothes one Christmas. It was really
so
awesome.
if you don't know, Seekay is a huge Wu-Tang fan.
I'm a big.
And if you go to his restaurant, it's like amazing, gourmet food, American style tapas, like done in a really creative way, and it's just badass old school hip hop playing.
Exactly. I grew up in Houston, so.
And it's just such a cool juxtaposition. I mean, anytime anybody comes into town, I take them to Swift's.
Yeah.
For the food, for the drinks, for you, for the service, but also for that environment. That's
Wu-Tang Clan was just always this chimera, this blending of what I would consider my two cultures. The joke. I mean, there's a real famous chef, TV personality, Eddie Wang, that talks about being a rotten banana. That's kind of like with having this nice brown bruised black marks. You know what I mean? And so I'm deeply rooted in kind of hip hop culture just because of my upbringing and everything. But like I said,
just got it. Rotten
Chinese.
Banana, yellow, and it's got the brown there.
Exactly.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And so this idea is that the Wu-Tang Clan was always for me. I'm like, yo, they're playing old kung fu clips. I know that movie, and then they're rapping over it. Like, this is dope, And so for me, it was always a thing. And then this year, they're coming to Fun Fest. I had the honor of meeting Raekwon, the chef, last South by Southwest. Got in touch with their people, so we're trying to get them to come in and have dinner. And so
it's gonna happen.
It's gotta happen. It's gotta happen. Wu family forever. So we're trying to try to make it happen. But it's just one of those things that I always thought it was funny that you go to a restaurant and you're not allowed to listen to the music that you were just listening to in your car. For some reason, like everyone had to be toned it down, and it's kind of like what you were talking about, how you got to go all out. To me, it was like, this is the music that I like to listen to. This is what I listen to when I'm at home eating by myself.
Right.
Like, why not?
Why change it up?
Why change it up to meet some weird standard that nobody agreed to?
That's what, with Black Swan Yoga, for example, which is one of our brands, that's one of the things that made them popular, and one of the things that we're continuing to push. We actually just got notification that we got Yoga Studio of the Year again here in Austin. And
nice, congrats.
Thank you. And one of the reasons is just, we don't have to play this like ethereal new age kind of music. And I'm down. I've played my fair share of ethereal new age music, but it's not like you need to. Like, we'll play some hip hop there. We'll play some dope tracks that really actually take that practice out of this, kind of holy, sacred thing and just make it real. Like, yeah, all right, the breath can take you wherever you want. It can be as sacred as you want, but it doesn't mean we have to play at it.
Right.
Like, we have to pretend that we're all.
And it's whatever
there.
Centers you, I mean, there's some music, even aggressively, what I would consider harsher music, that centers me sometimes, I mean, because it ties back to some memory. I remember reading an article the other day about the kind of, if you really think about the concept of curse words, it's
nonsense.
Completely nonsense. Like, we all decided that for some reason this word, we shouldn't use this word.
Yeah.
And so when you hear it, you're just like, oh, and you still have this deeply rooted case when you were 3 you only had 11 words in your head.
Yeah.
And one of them, you're like, you never said that word. And that's what happens. So now you hear music and you're like, you can't say that word. It's going to take you out of this spiritual zone. Like, that word didn't exist when somebody was inventing yoga.
Yeah.
Nobody sat there and says, you know what, when you say don't say this or don't listen to that. And to me, that's always been a very weird thing to me, where like hip hop, because you get just kind of shamed or shunned for whatever reason. And there is something to be said about content, but again, it's like any other art. It just takes you somewhere.
Right.
And if it takes you a place you don't want to go, then don't listen to it.
And don't lump it all in together. It's not the same thing. It's funny, they do, like, anytime they do a study on a certain type of music or something like that, I'm like, you can't fucking generalize it. It's that piece of music. It's like saying, oh yeah, heavy metal fucks up people's, thing. Well, what are you playing? Like, are you playing some good shit? Are you playing that horrible shit?
And who are you testing on?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's art. Yeah. And if that art enhances your experience, then great. Yep. And it's just about, and if you're cultivating an environment, it's just about being able to read the general vibe of the environment and being able to plug something into that.
Yeah,
no doubt. So I want to go back. So we talked about some of the good reasons to be CEO and create something. That part of that creative process, part of building a movement, part of being of service, providing for different people, obviously satisfying your own vocation in line with your own mission, all the good reasons. And then there's some fucked up reasons to lead other people. And I told you, I wanted you to watch that documentary, Going Clear, about Scientology or Clear or whatever. Going Clear. because there was some fucked up reasoning behind creating that. And I was kind of a little bit blind. I knew they were weirdos, but until I saw that documentary, I had no idea the extent of just the human rights abuse and the manipulation of people's psyche that was going on in the creation of this, you know, all the way from L. Ron Hubbard now to the new leader, Miscavige. And it's, if you haven't seen this documentary, it's unbelievable. Like,
right.
Your
jaw dropped half the time and shaking your head the other half the time.
Yeah. I mean, it was really unreal. So, I mean, basically, so the premise of Scientology, they created this system that somehow is like a very poor man's EEG type of system where it's measuring brainwave activity.
You speak to an auditor.
Yeah. So you're holding onto these cans, which is super fucking weird anyways.
Right.
You hold on to these
it's supposed
cans.
To pass a current through you.
Pass current through you, and then it'll measure the mass of your thoughts. And if you have density in your thoughts, it means you have to
let it go.
Speak it out, right? So this has been around, confession has been around for a long time. The Catholics figured out early on that it makes people feel better when they tell their secrets because they're holding these things in, they're guilty. So you tell the priest, you get absolved, you know, by the priest, you get forgiven, and then you feel better. So that's a technique they use to make sure that the priest had a job, and that also they could apply something that, you know, made people feel better at the least. Well, so Scientology just adapted that and added some, you know, machinery, which is dubious at fucking best.
At best.
But where it gets really fucked up is then they keep records of all of the confessions, which are these audits, and then they use that shit to blackmail people.
Yeah.
It's like the most fucked up thing ever.
And also it ties in, the part that would intrigue me, honestly, was the financial aspect of it, that they tied in a growth. I grew up playing a lot of video games. And I have a lot of friends who now make apps, and they always talk about everyone's looking for the next Candy Crush Angry Birds that does some $3 million a day because people... There's a point where there's a calculatable amount of money that you're willing to spend for your entertainment. And there are these things that are what they would consider achievements that if you're so close that justifiable amount makes sense for you to play.
Yeah.
Like if you came up to me and asked me, hey, you want to pay me $1 to play Candy Crush? I would say absolutely not. Right. But if I played it for free and then there's this one level that's frustrating me, and then I see that if I pay $1, I'll be able to beat this level. That level of achievement all of a sudden becomes worth it for you to pay that, right? The cost, but opportunity cost is there. Yeah. So this idea of you saying that, hey, there's these courses that lets you go higher in this, that gives these little micro rewards.
It's this progression. So to back up a second, like Scientology has this progression where you go level to level. The middle level being clear, which should be the end level. In theory, right? Yeah. So you're getting more and more clear, and you get certifications and everything, and you're paying the whole way up. But you're not actually like really learning anything. You're just giving these auditors more information that they can use against you and fucking mindfuck you with later. Right? So you're just confessing more secrets to the absolute worst people you want to give secrets to because they're going to manipulate with.
Well, the tenet of it was saying that you need to reserve these because it is a very aggressive belief structure that says that this belief structure, we need to defend aggressively this belief structure. So if anybody attacks it, rather than be defensive, you attack back.
Yeah.
It's viral. Like it feels like in a biological sense, you know, there's some things that just go by and decompose, and then there's some things that go out and attack. And this is that it. It's like if something prods at it rather than becoming defensive, it strikes back.
It goes on the offense, yeah. Right. And then actually, so besides getting clear, then it gets into super weird. There's Xenu, the Overlord. This dude was a science fiction writer, and he wrote some fucking wacky shit.
And he holds the Guinness World Book of Records for the most stories ever wrote.
Yeah, Rogan has a bit about that actually in his act, just talking about how ridiculous it is that people actually believe a science fiction writer. You know, about, and it's insane. Xenu, the Overlord, and there's the wipe out all of these souls called Thetans, and the Thetans try to attack your body, and you're trying to expel these. Not too dissimilar from, you know, casting out demons from the body. You know, a lot of these, you see some similarities in religions that have been around for a long time. You know, creating guilt, creating this release of the guilt. So first step, A, create guilt. Step B, release the guilt. Step C, make sure you add more guilt. add different effects, fears, install fears that say these things are out of your control. Some other force is going into your body that's not related to your own mind, and only our technology can expel them. And these are these thetans or whatever fucking crazy shit they have. And then, but that's all right. So that's one thing. And I guess for me, that would have been kind of like, that's fucked up. It's just, they're taking advantage of people. They're taking people's money. But then you look at the documentary and they have like prisons.
Right. That's the part. So there's a part of me when it comes to different people creating religions and it's so funny that we, for some reason, a lot of people tend to give a pass to something that's been around for a long time. So the idea of something coming in recently seems ridiculous, but yet, when somebody said if we found something written carved into a stone, like if L. Ron Hubbard was a caveman, he carved his story into the walls, it would all of a sudden have some sort of validity because you're just like, no, dude, they knew about it before they were the internet. Like, this is crazy. But for some reason, for whatever reason that you create this belief structure that you need to have to find peace or everything like that, that's what you're talking about is exactly where I was like, whoa, was the human rights side about the, of the people who, the guy was like openly being interviewed going, yeah, I got paid $40 a week.
Yeah. Well, and the Sea Org people, so they created this crazy workforce, which is basically slave labor from people they had guilted and brainwashed and mind fucked to the point where they're like in this crazy punishment structure where they're not getting paid. They're getting paid like 8 cents a day or something insane like that. And they're scrubbing toilets with toothbrushes and getting beaten and being trapped and removed from their children.
And part of the cleansing process, he would throw them overboard.
Yeah.
Like off the boat.
Off 30 foot fucking just throw them overboard. Just this crazy, this crazy paranoid, delusional, controlling system that it was somewhat voluntary. Like the people were so brainwashed, almost like this crazy Stockholm syndrome, where they felt so guilty for what they were doing that they were willing to do it, but they still had bodyguards to prevent them from doing it. So whether they were willing or not, that line is kind of blurred. And even they were saying like, yeah, I think we would have stayed even if we could have escaped, but there were bars and there was guards, but I think we were doing it willingly. Like they didn't even know. They were so fucking screwed up in the head.
Going back, this is kind of a nice little segue into what you've started the conversation with. There's something intoxicating about meeting someone extremely passionate about something, like deeply convinced about something. It's intoxicating. It 100% is. There's a part of you that sits there and says that when you talk to somebody, that someone can sway you. You have to have a lot of wherewithal to not be swayed by anything. And matter of fact, I don't know if that's necessarily a positive quality, is to never to be swayed. You ought to have such level of arrogance that you say that I know everything of all times. You're not an omniscient. But at the same time, so these guys, when you run into us, and there are all these leaders, dictator or positive leaders, positive world leaders and dictators and crazy rulers and overlords. Like the one thing I think they had was this ability to just capture people insofar as the average person. Now, the skeptical among us, less likely for this to happen because we delve. We're like, yeah, I'll listen to you, but you gotta explain a little bit more. Like, like even the guy who was there forever and then got to that level where they started exploring Xenu and all this stuff. You're like, yeah, see, you had to explain this. Now I'm $100,000 in, so my cost benefit has tipped. Right. So now I'm just going to stick through. But he's like, if you led with that, I would have ran away. There's no way. And so he's even a skeptic, So you got to figure out a way to get these. But these super people who believe it, who are that passionate, you take notice. Even a crazy person screaming on the subway, you pause for a second and go, what is this guy talking about? Because you sit there and go, he might have something I need to hear. Then he says something stupid and then you move on. But if he's like, hey, by the way, I just came from there's a huge fire, I would listen to him. Right. He seems very he's very convinced that happened.
Well, people have I think one of the most underrated senses that we have is belief detection. Mm-hmm. Like we're very good belief detectors. And I think that's a great part of what charisma is. It's just someone who truly believes in what they're saying and what they're doing. They have incredible self-belief, and that is part of it. It's genuine self-belief. That's really what charisma is. Now, there's two types of people. There's the people who that's coming from a real place because they're competent, they've done the work, and they got something to share, or they're a fucking psychopath and they believe shit because they're a psychopath or sociopath, and that's just part of a hardware malfunction in their brain. But it's hard to, our belief detection doesn't necessarily always differentiate between the two because we're just detecting belief.
Yeah, and you can't. And matter of fact, not only that, I mean, even beyond that of a psychopath, if you say that if that is some level of uncontrollable hormonal imbalance, there's something to be said. If that's a skill set of yours, you can say whether or not you use it for good or for evil, right? There's a thing that sits there and says that, in Oprah Winfrey, right? At this moment, she has enough reach, she has enough control over over her audience, that she could kind of say something even completely outlandish, and there's a percentage of her loyal constituents that would literally go, okay, I guess. And even if you second guessed it, you would believe in it. And it's up to her to make that decision to say, I can't say things like that. There's always these conversations, especially now. Social media allows your reach a lot further than it really should. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's funny. I'm actually trying to put my thoughts together about talking about people taking offense of things and so on and so forth. But social media has reached so far now that there are a lot of people that have the ability to say something, and for some reason, because you're right next to somebody who is famous, right? You have an article from Huffington Post that you don't know if it's a writer that's been doing political writing for 80 years or some intern.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know. I mean, did you see that article where Wall Street Journal posted about the Chinese president, and it says, and ESPN did this a couple years ago with Jeremy Lin, where it says, has he shown a chink in the armor?
That's hilarious.
And you're like, dude, that's the right adage. That is the right verb. What are you doing? You know what I'm saying? And I don't take offense to it. I laugh. But at the end of the day, but what I'm saying is that people had an uproar because they're like, this is the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, like you can't talk about a cheap African American as niggardly.
Right.
Even though it's not the same word.
It's not the same word.
It's not the same word.
Not the same word. And it's just kind of like, an offense can, there's a great phrase from Ricky Gervais that says, offense can only be given. It can never, I say only be taken. It can never be given. And, for me, there is a semblance of that kind of coming from this reach and this idea that somebody can have this type of reach and have this type of control. You can use it for evil, and so you talk, or for evil, for ulterior motives, right? So you have someone like L. Ron Hubbard, who is a great storyteller. Presumably, I've never read his 12,000 books or anything like that.
Right.
Presumably, he's a great.
I see some flaws in his storytelling. All right, I see some fucking errors, but okay, yeah.
But he's
presumably
a
presumably he wrote a lot.
And so, at this moment, he writes in Dianetics, to make any real money, you start a religion.
Yeah. And then
he
does that.
And then he starts a religion.
And then he withholds all of his taxes. And that other crazy story about how, again, going on the offense, they owed $1 billion to the IRS. Well, instead of paying, they just decided to launch 2,400 lawsuits against the IRS, use that as a negotiating ploy, and they fucking beat the IRS. And now they got
I don't know if that's ever happened.
That's never happened.
I don't know if that's ever happened.
It's like the only person to ever attack the IRS
and win.
Yeah. But it's coming from this crazy place. And what it exposed to me was that there is I feel like human beings, all of us, have software vulnerabilities. Like if we were an operating system, we're like Windows 98. Like there's some porous ass shit in there.
Right.
And there's ways and systems that people can exploit to get in there and really fuck things up and implant a virus that will suck out your money, your resources, and send you on this downward spiral. And I think, something that we should all take a look at is take a look at the human operating system and put up our own firewalls.
Absolutely.
Figure out ways that we can say, okay, this is wrong. These different ways that people do. I mean, Scientology was involving in this guilt and guilt release mechanism. Add guilt, release guilt. Add guilt, release guilt. That's one of the huge vulnerabilities in our operating system, because inside our own heads, we have this incredibly harsh judge. All of us do. This critic that is constantly criticizing what we're doing, loving ourselves conditionally, based upon the actions that we do. And so anything externally that validates that voice of the judge inside is like a hack into our system, and it validates that. And that's the same with an abusive relationship. Someone treats you bad, tells you, you are whatever, diminishes who you are, judges you in that way. If they can do it in the right way, subtly enough, they will tap into your own kind of judge inside your own head, and then you will internalize that. Yeah, I deserved that. That's the kind of thinking that goes on. And then you will look to them for the release, the validation of that love that'll come back, which is the guilt release mechanism. And that's a fucking mechanism that all of us need to track, whether we're doing it to ourselves, and especially if somebody else is doing it in a relationship or a fucking religion or whoever, your employer, whatever. Beware of that guilt and guilt release mechanism, because that is a huge software vulnerability.
And I think that also, it's a great, I've never heard it spoken in a technological way as much as a techie nerd as I am. It's funny. I always look at it. I talk about how it fascinates me when I see humans, when I look at the humans as a human animal, right? As an upright primate with the, in enlarged frontal lobe, right? The idea that we're just smart animals that are capable of, amazing things. But there are certain things that we're still hard-coded, hardwired. I joke about it because every time I think about when I leave the movie theater and we've got a movie theater full of hundreds of people, CEOs, you and I watch a movie, we've got 2 business owners who are successful, who have done our things, and then everyone piles into a room to expel waste. If I looked outside and I saw 78 dogs lined up for a tree to go pee at this one tree, it would be mind-boggling. There's a simultaneous the thought process of intelligence, of organization going, what in the world is going on, while at the same time recognizing that this is a very normal thing, so why wouldn't they? Right? But it's the idea of witnessing that. To me, every single time my head goes that direction, going, this is the weirdest thing in the world to me. It's these hardwired things that make me think about, because anytime I do something involuntarily, other than breathing, sneezing, whatever, even sneezing to a certain degree, like I try to find the source of that, like why that happened,
Yeah, to be free of the compulsions that are
compulsions.
I mean, some autonomic functions, as you said, are
necessary.
But be free and become aware, and that's real freedom. It's being aware of the compulsions. And the irony of this religion, they're talking about getting clear, but meanwhile they're laying traps all the way through different fish hooks that are in people's spines.
And it's simultaneously, it's pretty brilliant if you think about it, because it's like you set a bear trap to catch a bear. You set a mouse trap to get a mouse. And they're setting a lot of mouse traps. They're not trying to catch a bear in this. Even though somehow they caught a couple celebrities with this thing, a lot of them actually randomly. But that proves the power of the psychological side of it, because we're just hardwired to, like you said, to have these flaws in the system. And it could be someone this high who has made this level. I mean, you think about it in terms of, you can have a Marine who's had 100 hours of real battle-driven, hardened experience, and he still could be scared of heights or the dark or something, because that happened and you're hardwired from when you were 3 or whatever reason. I have a friend of mine who's twice the size of me and is scared of snakes, even this big, even one that he could kill accidentally with his toes. And he's just terrified of him. And it's just
I'm just terrified that there's someone that much bigger than you.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That terrifies me already. Well, going back to the celebrities, though, I think that they made a good point there, is that celebrities, like all of us, especially actors and people along that, they have insecurities like everybody does, And so if you're capitalizing on those insecurities, providing a way to get past those, then as soon as the mechanism starts in play, and as soon as you have confessions and there's actual dirt there, and then there's a public profile, and then you have incredible leverage, and then you're fucked. I mean, there's a lot of rumors that this whole John Travolta gay masseuse thing that came out was due to the fact that he was going to leave the organization. That he was going to bounce. And then all of a sudden this thing flares up, and it's like, hey, by the way, motherfucker, we got you.
Yeah.
We got you. Yeah. Sorry.
Don't forget.
Yeah.
Right. You just confessed all this stuff. Yeah, it's like if you took out that little portion of anonymity at confession for the Catholic Church, and you're just like, wait, hold up, wait, I just said all this, and they're recording all of it?
Yeah, they're recording it and can use it against me.
Like,
I mean,
whoa.
it's really crazy. And I think there'll be a time where obviously they have entrenched money, and I think they made the point like they're just kind of cool letting their numbers dwindle now because they're so rich because they bought all that real estate. They bought tax-free real estate. They got billions of dollars all over the world.
Yeah.
But it's just this weird force that still is out there. It's one of these anomalies in humanity. Like if you're looking from the alien observation station, hypothetically, of course, and looking down like, whoa, look at this fucking Scientology phenomenon.
Right.
You know, it would just be boggling.
And it's funny you say that from an observation from the outside looking in, because, you know, again, that is always the argument. That is the X factor in the argument when you talk about religion, is that at what point do we determine whether or not my belief structure is valid enough to become one? You know, like I think The Simpsons, right? That made was it The Simpsons? Maybe it was The Simpsons, or maybe no, it was the Family Guy that they had a religion to worship the Fonz. Right, they decided to create one, and so it's kind of like, at what point do you sit there and say that whether one is valid or not? I mean, right now we're electing the leader of the free world here in in a year, and one of the huge proponents of this is what person what belief structure this person has, because there's some inherent things that are tied to it, and that's what they say, but for some reason. It's, again, if someone says that I believe something that was invented 6 years ago, you'd be like, wait, this guy's a lunatic.
Yeah. For me, it's, I don't struggle with that, because for me, any religion should have a very simple criteria that the tenets of it, the core truths, all of that can be reliably achieved, accessed, and understood by everybody. Like they should be able to access those truths themselves without even, without being prod and led down,
without needing certain hierarchy of people.
Exactly. So, if other people aren't reliably coming to the Xenu the Overlord story without seeding Xenu the Overlord, if everybody was like, everybody in meditation on their own without hearing was like, man, I got this download about Xeno the Overlord and these Thetans. And I'd be like, okay, well, I guess there's something out there about that.
Yeah.
But one dude came up with that.
Right.
And nobody else is coming up with that except for the people who heard it from that dude.
Right.
That's not a valid religion.
Right.
Like you need to be able to reliably get to, and of course some people might have more access than others, but basically reliably get to the core truths. And then it becomes a show not tell religion. There'll be people who can help bring you to the library and where you can read from, and that's good religion.
Yeah. And I just think that, so that the conversations that happen about these type of, about an organization like that, I think such a fascinating psychological experiment to watch that, or study, to watch that documentary, because you really had to look at it and go, where were these people in that moment in their head? I mean, I look at it, it's just like how we give premise and we give grounds and value to people who recognize injustice and rise up against it. Mm-hmm. At the same time, it's like there is an not equal, there is a poignant amount of almost respect, morbid curiosity that comes from recognizing someone who sees an opportunity and takes it to that level. There's a part of me that goes like, I'm in awe, not in a positive way.
Right.
I'm in complete awe that this guy saw this opening and then just ran with it. Like there's all these thoughts. There's thoughts like that. The guy who invented the pet rock. I think about that and I'm just like, man, like how long did that take? And he did it, and he made however much money and moved on with his life. And again, that might be my entrepreneurial brain, but I sit there and I say, how, like, where did this guy come up with this and see the road you're supposed to take? I think that about, I had that conversation over dinner a little while ago to say, where do you see, what eyes do you see? Like, what do you see through your eyes when you look at a company and you look at where to take your brand and where to take, how to take this direction? And some people have that vision, and some people don't.
Yep.
And for him to have that vision and simultaneously be enough sociopathic that he doesn't recognize this as being wrong. Either he does, or he does that he doesn't care, or which I feel more realistically, he just really doesn't even see it.
He's blinded by his own.
Just says that this is necessary. You crack a couple eggs to make an omelet. That's just a necessary thing.
Yeah, all these rationalizations and justifications and all of these things that allow people. I think people are inherently good. I really do believe that. I think deep down we have to operate from. It's very rare that person that's intentionally doing evil.
Agreed.
I think you just rationalize and justify, all the reasons that that allow you to do this. And I think that's just a trick of the brain, because we want to think of ourselves as good, for the most part.
There's a thought that bounces in my brain at least a couple times a week, and it's the idea of being transference from a genetic level about goodness and morality on a genetic level, because there's something to be said that if we're able to pass on badness, then the tendency is for those people to not be able to procreate. There's an idea that bounces in my head is that blind people smile. People that were born blind still smile. Mm-hmm. There's children that are blind that smile and giggle and goo, mm-hmm. which to me is a genetic thing, because they've never seen smile. They're not mimicking. It's the idea that you have endorphins and happiness and the corners of your mouth turn up. And the idea is that a complete sadomasochist would smile as he's hurting himself or hurting someone. There's an idea of someone who revels in hurting someone would still smile. Like, you talk about psychopathic people, like psychos that go in there and a murderer, and you look at them and they're laughing covered in blood or something. We see it in movies and stuff, but they're expressing happiness. Now, whether that happiness causes a whole bunch of torment to everybody, it's irrelevant. But the idea is that genetically, we're hardwired that this thought creates this physical response. So there's an idea that genetic movement has been passed on. There's a conversation that says that we're one of the only sexual beings that actually, one of the few sexual beings that has sex for pleasure and not for procreation. There's a theory in my brain that maybe it was painful to a certain subsect of humans, and those people just never bred.
Right. Yeah, of course, that wouldn't get passed on.
It wouldn't get passed on. Yeah. There's a subsect of humans that developed, and they had barbs all up on their body parts, and it was extremely painful. And then they're like, dude, like, we're just not gonna have any kids.
Yeah, that wouldn't even get to that point.
It would never get that point
because the way that the system is built.
But this genetic defect that made it pleasurable, they had 87 kids.
Yeah.
And they're passing that on. And so there's a part of me that sits there and says that you're saying that people are inherently good, because the inherently good, it takes a village to lift us all up.
Sure.
And so that.
And there's just checks and balances in play. Like, if you're studying the phenomenon in mirror neurons, there's actual neurons in your brain that will mirror the emotions of the people who are around you, right? So whenever you're doing something that's hurting somebody else, you're hurting yourself. By that very process, the neurons in your own brain are firing to mimic the pain of the person around you. So it's this built-in system. You create happiness, you get happiness. You create pain, you get pain. It's a built-in neurological hardwired function of humans that accentuates that fact that we're here for each other's to provide pleasure.
Empathy. Yeah, and you have to develop that. I think that's necessary, because again, that's necessary because we're pretty fragile. You really think about it, as far as,
no doubt,
from birth to
not enough hugs and not enough sex will make an asshole. Reliably.
And even from birth for pretty long into life before we are self-sustainable. You know what I mean? And, in grand scheme of things, you're talking about, sharks are attack ready 30 seconds after they're born or whatever it is, and it's kind of like, so insofar as that goes, the idea of that quality is very, very valuable, because you need to be able to sit there, walk down the street, recognize that there's a baby crying, and you need to empathize with it. If you don't, if that thing is empty, that child being in pain, or that person being in pain, if you lose that empathy, the humanity of it all kind of goes away, and then we as a society would have crumbled a long time ago. The idea that, and that's what we're talking about. We've reached a point of intelligence and societal, in my opinion, luxury, that we can kind of go against some of these hardwired things, where I've met people in recent years, say in the last 10 years, that I believe started, instead of having this mimicking idea, I think have gotten to this idea that happiness is a finite resource, that if you are twice as happy as me, you've taken away access to a certain amount of happiness. It's a zero-sum game.
People create zero-sum games out of situations that are not zero-sum, like love, affection.
That's right.
All kinds of shit.
All kinds of shit. And I've realized that more prominently. Social media is full of it, even just among friends, that you don't realize that when somebody gets unhappy or frustrated or angry at somebody else's actions that has nothing, 0% to do with themselves, it confounds me, because moments ago you didn't even know this person was doing that. They might have been doing that their whole life. Mm-hmm. And for now you're aware, you can no longer live your life because you feel like, oh, you're taking more than your share of happiness. Why are you doing so happy? I'm not happy about that. I don't get to do that. Then, I'm doing that. And so there's a part of me that I feel like we've reached a pinnacle of entitlement and luxury that allows us the freedom to be dicks, to be these kind of assholes that think that way.
I think, we may have, on a material sense, maybe more advanced than ever, but then on a fundamental core sense, I think we're as empty as ever. I mean, I think
more empty, less connected.
Yeah, I mean, less self-love. And I think that's, if you're talking about the best defense for any of these software and vulnerabilities or any kinds of issues, two things you got to think about. One, how much do you love yourself? Because if you love yourself fully and you're not judging yourself and despising yourself and saying that you're a piece of shit for this or that, that's what creates vulnerability. If you love yourself no matter what, if your business fails, if you're having sex and your boner goes limp, or any of these situations that we antagonize ourselves brutally for, if we mitigate those and we love ourselves evenly and say, look, I'm imperfect, I fuck up all the time, but that's cool. I still love myself. I know who I am, and I love that. I love that being. That's the best defense. And then the best motivation, for me, and the best way to make sure you're doing what you want is to have genuine empathy. Like, if you really care about the happiness of others and you love yourself, you got 99% of this shit figured out. The rest is going to be fucking gravy, because you're going to have the defense and you're going to have the motivation to go out and do some good shit. Self-love and empathy.
I think I would add in there the self-love, empathy, the self-honesty and self-awareness. I don't think we're as introspective as a society,
True.
as a people, as we need to be, as we should be. I'm insatiably curious, and so whenever I feel a certain way, there's a tendency for me to dwell on it, to figure out why. And that's something that I've always had. It's something that I don't know if my family instilled in me. I'm assuming that so. I'll have to think about it. The idea is that the introspection that when you look at something and you feel a certain way about something, what you love or don't love about yourself, you should introspectively dissect that, break it down, and get it down to its empirical level, because I think the tendency is for people to not realize what truly is making them happy and what truly is making them unhappy, and they sit there and they think, for instance, for whatever reason you do action A because you think action A is what happened, but the action A has 17 rewards to it, and you only need one of those 17. You have 16 different things that actually cause harm, so maybe you can just pick one that has that exact action.
Yeah.
It's the idea that I don't think enough people, relationships is a perfect example, where you're looking for someone who understands A, B, and C about you, but you don't realize those things about yourself. You don't know those things. And so you happen to stumble upon someone who strikes a chord with this thing about you that you really love, but you have no idea. So everything else about them is wrong, but they struck that one chord that you were looking for, and you never took the time to say, that's the chord I need struck.
Or maybe it's not the chord you need.
Or maybe the struck.
Maybe it's some deficiency or something that you're not providing yourself
100%.
that you're using a surrogate to get, and then you get all crazy, and it's like that country song where you're shining lights on the door and throwing beer cans that are shadows.
Right.
You know, you get all kind of fucked in the head. And
right.
Again, so that self-introspection is key. I've used a lot of different things. The float tank can do that. The plants have helped me do that. And just general self-introspection, knowing when you're being a dick, knowing when you're not. And it's not hating yourself for that, but just being like, oh, whoa, I got to kind of reflect here and see where my force, you know, the impact that my force is having.
Yeah, we've reached a level of ego as a whole. I think that there's come the degree of solipsis that's kind of like we're in the center of our own universe, and we should be. But there's a part where you don't realize that even within yourself, a little mini universe affects the actions that happen beyond. I mean, for me, I'm generally pretty even keel, but you can tell, you know, my family went through some tragedy a couple weeks ago, and I was a little on edge. You know, sure. I couldn't deal with stress the way that I've always dealt with it, and it's kind of like one of the things that I had to combat it. Like I had to realize that I sat there and say, this when I'm normally doing this, but today my reserves are low, no doubt. So I'm not going to deal with this.
How helpful was it for you? I've been noticing you've been writing a lot of poetry lately. How useful is that for you as far as processing these emotions? It is
one of the more cathartic things that I can do. Poetry, it's one of those things, again, whether or not you're good or bad at it is completely relative, right? I mean, it's objective, subjective. And so for me, it really is the idea, in order for you to write or to draw or to do anything, you have to align your thoughts. Like you have to sit here and collect everything, put it in a way, and then execute it through this vessel. Whether it be art or whether it be writing. And so for me, writing is a way for me to sit there and go, how am I feeling? I know I'm sad, but what am I sad about? Yeah. Like, oh, I'm sad about this. This is why. And so what words can I use to express that? And it forces you to really solidify these things. And again, perfect example is that release, right? That guilt release, the idea that I can take this, where this pain is going, box it up, take it, put it into this little thing, and then send it out to the world and be free of it. It's so cathartic for me because it is one of those things that I have the tendency to just need to get it out of my head.
No doubt. Yeah, that's huge. It's something that I've gone back to a lot. And sometimes it's great to publish them, and sometimes it's great to keep them your own. But getting them out on paper is great. And I think for a lot of people who are hesitant to that, say, oh, I'm not a good writer, I'm not a good artist. I think you got to look at, you know, the words are not the craft of the poet, they're the obstacle. Like they're just getting in the way of you expressing your emotions most clearly. The medium, the paintbrush, the pen, the charcoal, whatever, that's not your craft. That's getting in the way of you expressing what you're trying to express through your art. That's a symbol that's getting there. So just express it the best way that you can. All of these tools are clumsy. The words are clumsy. No matter if you're Shakespeare or not, the words are still clumsy. They're in the way of the pure ideas. And so just getting them out, don't worry about your skill in the symbolism.
And then the skill and symbolism comes with you, just like any other skill set, just like any other muscle, comes from you. It comes from repetition. It comes from reading a lot more, because when you sit here and read a lot of poetry, then you go, man, I know exactly how this person is feeling. And then I never thought about expressing it that way. Or I didn't realize that I can express light by using dark colors or whatever it is, these skills. And so, I think that you're absolutely right. I feel like people are scared because, again, this judgment, this insecurity, this idea that someone's going to say it's not good, and like, who the fuck cares?
Yeah.
I don't think you're doing it the right way. I would care if I was doing it as a business.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about it as a product, about whether or not somebody's going to buy it.
Right.
Okay. But in the end of the day,
Like writing a screenplay.
right, writing a screenplay. So you say that you have to have some semblance of whatever. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But the other way around, for me, I love reading other people's poetry, and I love somebody who are insatiable writers and who people who try to release these kind of thoughts, because again I feel, and again I could be wrong, I feel that these people have the common ground for me as to say that they dive into their own head a lot, and then they come up and they go, look, I found a boot. And hey, look, I found a gold. You know, I mean, these kind of things, and that's true. I mean, there are some times where I start I have a a note on my phone that's just full of just things that I'm driving, and then I'm like, hey, remember this, because this is a great line, and I don't know why I was feeling it, but maybe it'll turn into a poem later. But sometimes it doesn't. But it's kind of like the idea of people who have that mentality of going into themselves and coming out with something, I think makes the world better. I think it makes them better, you know.
No doubt, my brother. No doubt. Well, people, if you're in Austin, go to Swift's Attic. For sure. Go to Swift's Attic. Follow this man, my good friend, Seekay Chin, online. What's your Twitter handle?
SeekayChin, Seekay Chin, just spelled out.
Thought that. And anything else? Anywhere other people can reach you and kind of reach out?
I mean, I'm pretty active on social media. Wu Chow opens up shortly.
Yeah.
You know, here we're talking about, we're
that.
aiming for October. If the city permits us. I might have to sacrifice a goat on the steps or something like that to make it happen.
City likes that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but I can say that that's my belief structure. Yeah. Maybe we'll make it work.
Zeus is hidden somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Within the city,
but
bowels
then,
of the city
hopefully that works. But other than that, I love interacting with people, and I love this. I love what you're doing, and continuing on, and we'll do this.
We'll do, my brother. Yeah. Glad we got to lay this down.
Yeah, when you
get back on here,
I'll be on the billion podcast followers.
Yeah, exactly.
On that one.
We'll go 10 million.
Okay,
guaranteed.
10 million. Let's do 10 million. Guaranteed. Done. I'll be here.
All right, my man. Good to have you on. So much love, everybody. Peace.